I'm a big believer in, know your worth and make sure that you're in a group of people and with a group of people, whether that's in a relationship or in a company or in whatever presence you're going to be in or a group, that they also know your worth and they value your worth. And otherwise, don't be there.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found, the podcast about the real, messy, unexpected journeys that lead us to the work we love. I'm Monica Argandonia, and every week I talk with someone whose story proves there's no single right way to build a meaningful life. Today on Path Found, I sit down with someone who embodies grit, curiosity, and the confidence to walk into any room, whether or not she was invited. And this conversation is especially meaningful because Vikki and I actually grew up together. We went to elementary and middle school side by side long before either of us knew where life would take us. Vikki grew up in Los Angeles County, raised by parents whose work ethic shaped everything she became. She started her career in tech before tech was even a thing, when it was just starting to take shape, rolling out personal computers at Northrop Grumman, troubleshooting hardware, and becoming one of the only women in the room. From there, she helped build early startup culture in Los Angeles and sold 2 of those startups to Yahoo and Microsoft. Today, she leads the largest business unit at Upland Software, guiding customer success, engineering teams, and the next generation of tech talent. In this conversation, Vikki shares the 3 principles that carried her through every stage of her career. Find what interests you, work harder than anyone around you, and be a positive influence. We talk about ambition, mentorship, navigating male-dominated spaces, and knowing your worth, plus the story of her dad, a butcher who could fix anything, and how following him around the house gave her the confidence to take apart computers at work. This is a story about finding what you're good at, working hard to get better, and refusing to play the not it game. Here is Vikki Yaller Radow. So I am super excited to be here today with you, Vikki. Out of all my guests, I have known you the longest since elementary school, but we haven't talked since elementary school, since 8th grade.
Which is crazy.
It is crazy. And so, the positive side of social media is that we are still connected. But I'm very excited to have this conversation with you because I know you've had this amazing career. I always start with, what were you like in school as a kid and going through high school?
Well, and apparently we were just chatting about for a few minutes before we started recording here about my non-sympathetic, which might play into, who I became. But Monica was saying that for context, for those that are listening, that apparently there was an issue on the field at recess and somebody had hurt her arm. And I was like, oh, shake it off. Let's go. You're fine. Meanwhile, it was legitimately broken.
I was like, Vikki, it hurts. You're like, nah, tough it up.
Tough it out. It's broken, but it's fine. You'll be fine. Yeah. I mean, I would say, honestly, I will, skipping ahead to more high school, I was the kid, and I don't really know how or why this came about, but I was definitely the kid that couldn't wait I was in high school and thinking about working in corporate America. I don't know how this got into my head. My dad, if you recall, was a blue collar worker. He was a butcher by trade, was in management, but was in that business. My mom did, I think it was after, we graduated from middle school, she went on to run payroll for Northrop Grumman, which I think is maybe where I got my taste of wanting to be in the corporate world. But for me, in my mind at that time in the late 80s, my thought was college was my path to get there, right? That was the door that I needed to go through to get to, but my landing was definitely going to be in corporate America. Doing what? I don't know. Okay. I had no idea, which was kind of a good thing that I wasn't really set on something because, if you kind of rewind in history a bit, when we were in high school, personal computers were just starting to come out, right? People, by the time we were, I think, seniors, people were starting to plug them in at home and were worried about things like unplugging them, and they thought that they would just wipe out or something odd. The knowledge wasn't there. But I say that because I ended up in tech, right? In corporate America, but I didn't know where that was going to lead me. But, to answer the question directly of how I was as a kid or in high school or in school growing up, I was definitely, as you remember, an athlete. We were just reminiscing about all the crazy things we used to do at our unsupervised recess, swinging from the handlebars with no supervision and
Over
flying
asphalt.
yes, over asphalt, literally with no hands and doing flips. I wasn't even a gymnast, which is scary that we were doing that. But yeah, I mean, I was super athletic, played softball. I was on a dance team, I think, in high school, if I remember correctly as well. But I was really focused. Even during that time, I wanted to work. I started working when I was 16. I loved the feel. I didn't know how to describe that at the time, but I just loved the feel of contributing to something and somebody paying me for that, which is really weird. But I enjoyed working even, at a very young age.
So you first generation going to college. How did you figure that out? So you knew you were going. Did you know where? Did you know
Oh,
what you wanted to do?
I knew because I kid you not, my mother gave birth to me and said, "You're going to college." It was not an option. She did not have the privilege of going to college. I mean, if she were still here today, she would say that. She grew up in an era where you got married typically before you even graduated from high school. So she didn't even graduate from high school at a proper time. She later, after having my brother, she later then went back and got her GED and took some college courses. And as I mentioned, she ended up running all of payroll for Northrop Grumman. For a Southern gal with no college degree, that's remarkable. But it really speaks to her work ethic and really how smart she was and willingness to work hard for what she was wanted and what she was good at. So I think that's, where that piece came from. It was never a choice. My sister and I both. And, we were talking earlier about some kids, and I firmly believe this as well, don't belong in college. That's not for them. And I agree with that. I think my sister might have been one of those people, but because that day and age, my mom felt that she and my father both were at a disadvantage because they didn't have a college degree. From the day we were born, we're told you're going to college. By the way, they could not help us pay for college, but we were going.
So did you know where you wanted to go? How did you choose a college?
I had no idea. So, I went to school all through after being together with you at Annunciation, which is a private school. I went through LAUSD for the most of my schooling and education. And when I compare my education, this is, not the best, but that I had at LAUSD and the resources compared to my husband, who grew up in New York, and the counselors and the things, he also is first generation. It's remarkable how different it was. So I don't know if that had to do with, maybe I was a little more shy than he was, and I didn't make the relationships or forge the relationships with my professors and the counselors and whatnot, but I didn't have the same help that he did. So I knew a few things when I was graduating high school. I knew that my parents couldn't afford and weren't going to be able to spend much to send me to school. I also knew things like state schools at the time, if your GPA was high enough, you didn't have to worry about your SAT score. I don't know if you remember those days, but that was happening as well. So I had a few factors of things that were going into it. Like I said, I knew I wanted to be in corporate America, so I knew I wanted to be in business, but that's kind of all I knew, right? So I, at the time, decided to apply to Cal Poly Pomona. This fit kind of all my criteria, right? It was a state school, not super expensive. I could probably get a part-time job. At the time in high school, I worked for Clinique Cosmetics and made decent money. So I figured, okay, well, my parents can probably help supplement some of the courses if I lived at home. And so that was my original plan. I did go to Cal Poly, I think, for about a year or so. My mom was working at the time at Northrop Grumman, as I mentioned. And she came to me and said, "Hey, they have a program. If you go to work full time at Northrop Grumman, they'll pay for your college.
Oh,
So long
wow.
as you get, an A average, which I had, they'll reimburse you 100%. And like B's were 90% or whatever." So I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I don't know exactly how I'm going to swing that, but I was already working quite a bit to pay for Cal Poly. So that's what I ended up doing. So I didn't have a traditional college experience. I got a lot of my true life experience, frankly, through working at Northrop Grumman full time and taking classes. I ended up going to Laverne University, transferred to there because it was just easier to get the courses so I could finally graduate. But I worked pretty much full time all through my college experience. Again, I knew I wanted to be in business. I was working towards a business business degree. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But the really nice thing about going to work at Northrop was it helped me figure out as well. So I think that's one of the things that I think is missing a beat in the college experience today is just that real life, real world experience that can expose you to the different things. I mean, I know we do internships and things like that. Those are so important in my mind because it just exposes you to the things that you might be interested in, the things that you might be good at, all of that. I had that forced in because it was paying for my college tuition, but that's how I found tech.
What were you doing at Northrop Grumman?
I originally was hired as what they call a timekeeper. Back in the day, they had these punch card systems and they would do their time cards. The punch card, for those of you that even know what that is, most of you probably don't. It's this huge, massive computer system. It is the size of usually people's bedrooms. It's massive. And people would record their time because for the government, right? And they would need to ensure that you were charging your time against certain sales orders. And you'd have to put that onto these time cards. And then they'd be pushed through the computer to add them up at the end of every week. That's where I started. But as I mentioned, right, I was at like kind of that generation that had started with personal computers. So Northrop Grumman, I think it was 1989 or 1990, decided to roll out personal computers out to people's desktops, only a few in each department. So they were moving not really away from mainframes, but they were taking some folks that were doing some things on mainframes and putting them on personal computers. I had the experience. And so I raised my hand and said, I know what a personal computer is. I can help with that. And my tech journey began. Literally. They were like, great, we'll take you. And I started in a business unit called business management at Northrop Grumman. And we rolled out the first personal computers at Northrop Grumman at the Pico Rivera site. I'm still at Northrop when I graduate. And I found, and this is like when you and I were chatting before, I believe in sort of three foundational things that I try to always talk to my kids about. I've done some mentoring also. I think I mentioned to you not only in my company, but I did some stuff at UCLA back a few years ago with their engineering and tech folks. And I always tell them, these are the three principles that I found to be successful for me. One is figure out what you respond to and what your skill set is. And sometimes you don't really know what that is, like I said, until you're put into different positions and things. I was drawn to certain aspects of technology. It kept me very interested. It was a way that challenged my brain, and I liked that. And so I kind of gravitated towards that. But I was also really good at certain aspects of it, troubleshooting it, but there was the other people side of it as well. I was also helping people with those personal computers. And so I started to think about okay, what could I do with this, right? And so as we rolled out all those computers, I started naturally doing desktop support. And then desktop support led me into doing things. It just piqued my interest and my skill set. And I was the only female, by the way, who found this to be interesting, but it was the actual technology side of it. So I wanted to like rip apart the inside of that desktop computer and look at it and see what was going on. We were it was minor stuff at the time, but replacing memory, swapping out hard drives. Mm-hmm. But that to me was fascinating. So that's one of my first, foundational things is like, find out what you're interested in, what you are good at. Some people will tell you, and I think this is true, follow the things that you're passionate about, and then you'll become an expert in them. And I think there is some truth to that. But for my personal story, it was really more about, I found things that were interesting to me. And then I also happened to be good at them, right? And maybe, right. I don't know, it was like the chicken and the egg. Was I interested because I was good at it and nobody else was at the time and it was so new? Or was it just simply that I was interested enough in it and therefore I became passionate about it? I'm not sure. And then I became good at it. But that's kind of what one thing led to the other. So then I started doing desktop support, started learning the hardware side of it. And then I started learning the network side of it. And it just kind of bled out from there. After I graduated, I was still at Northrop Grumman. I spent about 5 or 6 years doing all of that and learning all of that, just taking in as much as I possibly could. As I said, it was mostly male dominated. Some of the desktop support and training stuff still had, females. It was more female dominant. But the stuff that I was really I was good at that, but I was most interested in was that like, how does this networking stuff work? How does, all of that stuff? So then I started looking for a job after about 5 or 6 years, and I ended up going to work for Viacom, and specifically Showtime Networks. And Viacom and MTV were opening up their West Coast presence, and they needed somebody that was just on site to do a little bit of everything with tech, with these personal computers. So they just wanted a person that was personable, that was technical, could do some desktop support, software support, but also do some, I'll say like easy enough hardware stuff, could swap out pieces of hardware, do some troubleshooting, whether that was memory or, like I said, hard drives or all that stuff I had been doing. So I was like, yeah, sure, great. So I took that job, and we were at the time opening up their Westwood office for Showtime. And then we opened up an office in Santa Monica for MTV and Nickelodeon. And I stayed with that group for about 5 years, and I just was like a sponge. I was kind of all over the place, where I was a manager, and we managed these groups of folks that were at these different sites doing all these different things in tech. Now, we had network operation people, right? Email folks. And so I was working with all of those folks and just learning truly as much as I could. During that time, the dot-com frenzy started, and I kind of got the bug because I'd been at Viacom at that point for about 5 years. And I thought, well, I've been in corporate America now for 10 years, like big behemoths. I wonder what a startup would be like. I mean, I swung hard the other way because I really, really enjoyed the work, but I didn't enjoy a lot of the red tape at those large companies. And I respect and understand the need for red tape, right? And process and order. I am more operational and process oriented than most, but I really loved the idea of just being able to make a direct impact and without all the red tape and so forth. And so one of my guy friends had said, there's a bunch of tech in LA at the time that was starting up. You should look into one of those startups. And then that started.
So you're at the forefront. I mean, this is MTV and even Viacom. And
Yes,
I mean,
I
it
know.
must have been a lot of people not knowing what was going on and what they're doing. I mean, the opportunities must have been incredible.
The opportunities were incredible. I'm going to be frank with you, though. It was tough being a female. I'm not going to lie. That was really hard because at the time, like just to give you a taste of what the era was like at Northrop when I worked there, remember in tech, I was required to still wear pantyhose and dresses every day, which is to me is just archaic. But you're right. There was a lot of opportunity and a lot of just so much to learn, and so much was happening, and it was changing so quickly. Even, what people knew about the internet. Like when I tell people today where I work now, they laugh because, I'll say something like, well, I helped start one of the first social media companies. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, like it's not the social media companies that you know today, but I helped start this company called GeoCities, way back in the day. And I wasn't one of the first, 10 people, but I was just before it went public, and we eventually ended up selling that to Yahoo. But that truly was the beginnings of what we know today as social media. So yeah, I mean, there was just so much fun. I like the challenge of new things and learning them. And I was able to compete enough because I had been in it kind of since the beginning. Like when you go back to Northrop and I'm rolling out the desktops and the personal computers at the time. So yeah, there was a ton to learn. What I learned in that process is I just was, touching and feeling and doing different things, is that when I started my first startup, I was like, oh, this is what I really love. So I caught wind of that and the fast pacedness of, being able to get stuff done and get through red tape of startups. And I was kind of hooked. So I did that for a while. Like I said, we sold one company to Yahoo. I helped start another company that I was in the first few people that were hired called Big Fish. We changed the name to Frontbridge and sold it to Microsoft. The technology that we sold to Microsoft from Frontbridge is the bones or the beginnings of what we all know as Office 365 today. And then I like to always couple that with work hard. I mentioned this to you, I think in my email to you about that's the number one thing I think I tell everybody is work hard. And I don't mean work hard for your work ethic. I mean, look around and you work harder than everybody else around you. That's key.
But you enjoyed it.
I loved it.
So that makes a difference. But
That's why step one is, right, find what you're good at and find what you love. So at GeoCities, we ended up servicing, it was like 1.2 million customers through the internet. So I took a job managing customer service for that tech support company.
Got it.
And my biggest challenge, and again, like I loved a challenge, right? They were like, yeah, we have all these customers and we only have a few reps. The gal who started out reading literally pieces of mail to the company, she started getting on the computer and customers were sending in emails with questions and she started answering those. So we had a couple reps like that were just, but they couldn't keep up with, it turned into, like I said, 1.2 million users. They couldn't keep up with the number of questions that were coming in to be able to answer them in a timely manner. So I came up with a function before there was even technology to do this, but where questions would come in and we would classify them based on the type of question and come up with some basic answers. Think of like an FAQ guide, but there really people weren't doing that yet, but we kind of had that and then wrote emails that were pre-canned that we could just massively send out based on the questions. We started handling it that way. So, we just did lots of stuff. I also got in trouble at that job, by the way, because my reps' computers weren't fast enough. And I'd asked the IT folks, you'll like this story, for some memory in the machines because they were slow. And I was like, listen, like we're answering a lot of emails here and whatever else we were doing, I can't remember, but we needed more memory in the machines. And so, I don't know, IT drug their feet or whatever. So one night I stayed late and took apart all the computers in my department. There's like 10 of them. And I pulled out everybody who had the most memory and put it into the folks that needed it more. So I just moved around some hardware. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but man, did I get in trouble. The IT guy came down. He was like, who do you think you are? I was like, well, I asked you to do it and it never got done and I knew how to do it. And oh man, I'll never forget, but leadership laughed at me at the time. They thought it was cute. The IT guy did not at all.
Never your friend again.
He was so mad at me. He hated me.
So why do you think there were so few women at this point in time?
Well, it's still the same, right? Math and science and technology, right? The typical STEM, we still have the problem. It seems to be male dominated. You and I could unpack this for hours, but like, does it start when they're kids, right? Where does that start? I think that a lot of females, it's intimidating. The topic is intimidating. They're not exposed to some of the things that, sadly, that I think males are, at an earlier age. I had the good fortune of having a dad that was extremely mechanical, very engineer-like. Even though he was blue collar and a butcher, he could fix anything in our house. And so I, as a kid, would follow him around, and what are you doing, Dad? No, I'm taking apart the washer. Why are you taking apart the washer? Well, we didn't have money to call somebody to fix the washer. So my dad had to figure it out. These were before the years of YouTube where you could just YouTube it and figure out how to fix your dryer or washer. So I think that was why I had been exposed to it and I wasn't afraid of it because of that with my dad. I also, if you remember, my dad had a really, really big personality. He was a big, strong, aggressive kind of personality. And so, the typical dominant male at the time in tech didn't frighten me, didn't scare me. And let me tell you, they tried many, many times. There were many times where they would, try to, because like you said, there was a lot of people learning and it was a little bit of chaos, but no one really wanted to admit what they didn't want to know. So there's a lot of like, I know more than you do kind of thing going on. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say bullying, but that feel to it of like, don't question me. I know what I'm doing, and that didn't intimidate me, but I think that's intimidating for most people. And so, it's probably a whole other podcast about why this exists and why females are just not in that field. I think it's getting better for sure. It's why I actually volunteered so much at UCLA with the engineering folks and the tech folks there because female in particular, there's a whole study about the very first job. It starts here. The very first job offered to a male and a female, talk about pay discrepancy exists, especially in tech as well. And in general, it exists because if you look at historically, I think this is changing, but females will get offered a job and they say, yes, thank you so much, whatever the dollar amount is. And a male from the very beginning typically will say, yes, thank you so much, but I was thinking of this number instead. How about that? And if you multiply that every time, every year, every merit increase, every job, whatever, you can see where the disparity, it gets greater and greater through the years. So that was one of the things that I used to teach on, is like, ask the question. Do not ever not ask the question about what else is on the table.
Right.
Make sure you're negotiating for yourself.
And that's true even for moving up, promotions, or applying for a job. So they say men will look at a job description and they could be missing half of the requirements and they'll still apply and say, yeah, I deserve this promotion or whatever it is. And women, if they can't tick off every box, will say, no, I can't do it.
Yep. No. And, I cannot stress to you how true that is. And I've been on all sides of that, right? I've hired many, many people, and I know that in hiring them, but I also have learned it personally. I watch my husband, the things that even with our kids, and things that my daughter right now is senior in high school and she's applying to colleges and whatnot. And some of the things that she's applying for, she's like exactly as you're describing. Oh no, here's the criteria. I don't fit all the criteria. He's like, that doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, that doesn't matter. But you're exactly right. So, reframing that and teaching people to think differently and react differently than I think females in particular do is key to that. I've really, really tried to instill that into my kids and people that I've talked to. And I love people like yourself that are doing this, because I do think that those are some of the nuances that you don't know until you know.
Exactly. All right. So you 2 successful startups that you sold. Then what?
Well, so they didn't come in order. So the GeoCities one, and I am forgetting the dates on these, but the GeoCities one, after we sold it to Yahoo, it was the heyday of tech in LA at the time. It was kind of the heyday of tech in general. But by the time we sold that company, there were startups popping up everywhere. I think it was around 1999 or so, 1988. And in LA, if you had been in a startup, or especially one that you had sold, you were a hot commodity. So I had literally my choice of jobs at that point, anywhere in LA of what I wanted to do. So I did a few startups like that. And so I sold FrontBridge. We sold that to Microsoft. I worked for Microsoft in the transition team for about a year. And then I laughed and said, I think I'm going to retire. I think this is good. I'm going to end on a good note here, right? Done a bunch of stuff. It's super fun. I really wanted to have my daughter. My husband and I had married. He had a daughter from a previous marriage, but he and I had not had a child yet. And I really wanted to do that. And I was having trouble having her because now I'm late 30s at this point. So I finally slowed down and I just did some consulting for some tech companies in LA because I could, right? I knew a bunch of people that were there. There were still some companies that needed help streamlining their operations, or whether it was that or look at their call centers and help streamline those, or whatever the case was, while I was trying to get pregnant and have my daughter. I did that for a bunch of years, inclusive of just naturally started helping friends. They would say, I have a startup idea. I had one friend who said, at the time, she had what we know now as a bento box idea.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, I have this idea that I want to do for lunch boxes and blah, blah, blah. But she just had no business sense, right? So I kind of was like this all in one. I started asking her questions like, well, how much does it cost? How are you going to get paid? And she's like, oh my goodness, these are all really good questions. Because she's a mom, right? And has a really great idea. And she did have a really great idea and ended up actually selling it to like Whole Foods and stuff. So I did a lot of that kind of thing, just consulting and everything from nitty gritty tech, company questions, operational stuff, to high level business advice about how to, get from A to B, raise money, figure out the business model, write a business proposal, whatever those things were. And I helped my kids, grow up, I guess, as I was doing that. And then my older one was going to college, and, you kind of start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I was like, this is not going to be enough for me. I'm going to need more than what I'm doing now. And so I decided, while I would love to go back to a startup, I just don't have the luxury of that. My mom had passed away. My father was living with us full time. I had my 2 kids. One was going to college. So I kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, but not quite yet. Mm-hmm. So I decided to go back and kind of see what I wanted to do. I mean, I was kind of all over the map on like, do I want to start my own true consulting company, that's tech oriented or business oriented, or do I want to go back in house? Do I want to work for a behemoth company again? But I found this company in my search and my quest to find something that's a mid-sized public company. And their business model was they bought about 30 different startups and put them all under the same umbrella. It's called Upland Software. And I was completely intrigued. I was like, what? That's got to be some serious chaos.
So you're enjoying that?
I love it. Yeah. It's a new set of chaos every day, but I love it.
So this is the last chapter? Is this you're going to do this till you retire? What's next for you?
I obviously am not doing any of the consulting. I'm full-time in-house with Upland. My father has since passed away. My youngest, is going to college in a few months. So I don't know what's next. Like I always joke around at Upland, I'm here as long as I'm contributing and I'm making a difference and I'm having fun. Right. I'm being challenged. And that continues to be where I'm at today. I don't know, but I do look forward to, I don't know what will happen in the future. Maybe I'll do another startup. Maybe I won't. I don't know. I'm kind of like TBD. Here's what I do know. I want to keep doing things that challenge me and interest me and that I'm good at. I want to have the ability to work hard. I don't want to work in a place where people aren't working hard. That to me is really important. And also, I love a positive environment. Like to me, those are like the magic triangle of things, being that positive. And there's a lot of negative things that happen every day in our world, everything, no matter what industry you're in. But the culture and the environment around me and being a positive impact into that is really important to me as well. So if I can do those three things until I retire, wherever it is, I'll be super happy.
So earlier on, you said there were 3 foundational things. And the first one was, build on your skill set, like figure out what you're good at and pursue that. What are the other 2?
The second one is work hard. Work harder than anyone and everyone around you because it creates a nice competition. That's the athletic in me, right? The athlete in me wants to compete, and I'm not competing, but I'm competing with my competitors, right? I want my team members amongst me I want all of us to work super hard so that we can beat out our competitors. So that's number 2. And number 3 is be that positive influence. It's a world of negativity. Of course, it's lazy to focus on negative things. It really is. You have to build discipline in your mind and in your heart every single morning to wake up and find the positive in things and be that positive influence. I want to be that, and I want to be around people that are doing that. So to me, those are the 3 things. And, there's a whole bunch of little sprinkles around all of that, right? There's, help others. There's, I have this saying at work, don't play the not it game. Like, not it, like, oh, we need somebody to do blah, blah, blah. And so many people want to first just say, not it, not me, not doing it. I want to be I'll do it. That's the culture, right? So there's a bunch of those other sprinkle things that I would sprinkle across those 3 foundations. But for me, where I found the most success is abiding by those 3 things.
Did you have people who, how did you know that? Or was that, do you think, instinctual? Did you have mentors? Were there people you looked up to that, hey, I want to be like that person?
I wish I could say that it's actually why when you reached out and said that you were doing some of the mentoring stuff that you're doing, I love that because I did not have a mentor at all. As you can imagine, being a female in tech, who's going to mentor me, right? So I was either, people were either annoyed by me or intimidated by me. And there weren't a lot of other females to, come alongside of me. So I didn't have that. My biggest mentor was probably both my parents. My mom, as I said, ran payroll for all of Northrop Grumman, also a female in finance without a high school degree. I mean, somebody works their ass off, right? Somebody clearly is a hard worker and knows how to get along with people. Their work ethics, both of them, were outstanding. I definitely got that from them. I also got my ability and my toughness, right, from my father, who just taught me, like, I don't care. I don't care if it's a boys' game or a men's game. It doesn't matter. Like, you're in it. Remember, I played softball for a bunch of years and, I had that piece of me in me. If I had to point to anyone that really significantly was my mentor, it was my parents and especially my mom.
Do you think it's gotten better in tech? Like, are you mentoring people in your workplace? Like, has it changed?
Yes, I think it's changing. I don't think we're ever going to be there. We're never done, right? Growth is never complete. This time around, it's absolutely different. My boss is a male who's younger than I am, but his wife is an equal rock star as himself. And he respects women. He loves anyone who's smart and willing to work hard and do the things that are supposed to get done, whether you're female or male. That is very different and so amazing. I'll tell you, my team as well, I've got 20 something, I think now, that report in to me, but my team will also tell you that one of my greatest strengths is my team building and just pouring into them. It's also a little bit of the startup in me, but I like to match up what are the needs in the group. What are the skill set of people that I have and where do they want to go in their career and how do I put all that together? It's like a puzzle, right? So I'm always talking to my team members about where you want to go. What do you want to do? What are the things that you're looking around that you're interested in? Let's try you out with that. I've got some, and how do I make that fit into what the team needs overall? So I do a ton of that as well. And as you know, I volunteered, at UCLA for a while in their program until I moved to Nashville. So I think it's getting better. I will tell you this though, I sit on a leadership team and it's still male dominated in a tech company. I for a long time was one of, I think there were 9 of us and now there's 2 females. I do think it's better, but it starts so early that I watch this next generation. I do think that, our kids have a better chance of it being much more equal.
So you have a daughter that's going off to college. What are you telling her? Like, what advice are you giving her?
Well, I give her, and so my older one, by the way, I mentioned this, that my husband had a daughter when I met him. She was 2, but we pretty much raised her. And then she went to OU and University of Oklahoma. She was their goalkeeper there. And now she lives in Austin, Texas, and works in private credit. She knew I feel like from the time that she was born, what she wanted to do. She wanted to be my husband's in finance, wealth management to be exact. And she knew she didn't want to be a money manager, but she knew she wanted to be somewhere in that world. And so for her, she knew she was going to major in finance and economics. She's very good in math. And so she knew straight away. But I always said to her, but try things on. I know you've got a busy life with soccer, but do the internships, right? Go into a job. She took her first job at AllianceBernstein, which was through an internship that she had done. And it wasn't precisely what she wanted, but I gave her the same advice that I tell everyone and that my parents gave me too, is get your foot in the door and look around, do the very best job that you can do at this task that you've been given, and look around and see what else looks interesting to you, and then forge a path to that or figure out how to get to that, which is what she's done. She's been there for, I think, 5 years now. You got to figure it out. There's no way to really know until you start trying it. I had somebody tell me, this is weird, but I had somebody tell me a long time ago, when I was really young, about dating, and at the time it just didn't make sense to me, but I share this with my kids all the time. Dating is like holding up a mirror, and you never think of that when you're dating someone or you're in a job. You're constantly worried about what they think about you, right? What do they think about me? Do they like me? Am I doing a good job? Whatever. But you need to make sure that you're looking at yourself in that mirror as well. Do I like this? Do I like what I'm doing? Am I good at what I'm doing? Do I like the person that I am when I'm with this person? Do I like the person that I am when I'm with this group of people? Some of the challenges that I had in tech was, and I'm a big believer in, know your worth and make sure that you're in a group of people and with a group of people, whether that's in a relationship or in a company or in whatever presence you're going to be in or a group, that they also know your worth and they value your worth. And otherwise, don't be there. Go find it. It's like that internet thing where the car is in the garage. It's all dusty, and the grandpa gave it to have you seen this or heard this? And they give it to the grandkid.
No.
It's an old car. It's dirty, dusty, looks horrible. The grandpa had it, in the garage, and the grandpa pulls out the grandson who turned 16 and said, "I've been saving this for you. This car is for you. You can clean it up. You can keep it, you can drive it, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want, but it's yours." And so the kid's like, okay. So the first person he talks to says, "Oh yeah, I'll give you $500 for it. It'd be good for parts." And that's great. And the second person that he goes and talks to says, oh, this might be a rare beauty. We could probably fix it up and do some driving with it. I'll give you, $5,000 for it. And then they bring in some other person who's a collector and he's like, this is a rare car. I will take it off your hands right now, $100,000. Like, know your worth, right? And find the people that know that worth as well. So I love that because I always tell my kids that, like, make sure you're in the presence of the people that, first of all, know your worth, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, make sure that when you're with the people that you're with, whoever that is, that they know what your skill set and your worth is as well. And that's hard in tech when I was the only female.
Right.
So sometimes I had to persevere and just stick it out. But that's my advice is do that. Know yourself. Make sure you're looking in the mirror. Make sure that you're seeing what you like to do and what you're good at and what you want to do. And follow that. You don't have to have it all figured out today. I don't have it all figured out, right? Like you asked me, like, what do you want? What is this it for you? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. We'll see. It'll be fun to find out, won't it?
Yeah. Vikki, this was so great. One, I would love to be on one of your teams because the way you talk and how you've wanted to build other people up says a lot about you and the kind of person you are. And I couldn't be happier for all your success. So thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Thanks for
of course,
the mentoring and the work you are doing. And I hope it's not another, 40 years until we talk again.
Exactly. No,
although if we're around in 40 years to talk again, that would be a good thing.
I would love that. Right. Either way, let's just keep talking for at least the next 40 plus years. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And honestly, I don't think I've even done anything all that remarkable. I thank you for the compliment, but truly it's just been a privilege to be a part of technology and growing up in it and giving back. Like I said, I like to make a difference, not just with our customers, but with the folks that are around me. And I didn't have that. I didn't have somebody looking out for me and trying to help me. So I love what you're doing with this podcast and the other stuff I know that you're involved with. And any way that I can help or be a part of it, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.